Good morning and welcome to the new season of Primetime at the BU Library. Primetime is a collaboration project between the Friends of the BU Library, Faculty Development, and many other offices on campus, which celebrates the learning beyond the classroom through the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. Primetime presentations include past sessions, are available in the BU Digital Library, which can be found on the library's homepage. This is the strange part now. We're trying something a little different by doing a Primetime at a different day and time. Join us tomorrow, February 12th at 1:50 in the afternoon for a Talk About Teaching program with Jay Rasmussen on writing high-quality traditional assessments. Today we welcome Susan Brooks as she presents a Talk About Teaching presentation about a revelation that endeavoring to become a better distance education instructor revolutionized her face-to-face classes and how I became a better teacher, period, by teaching online. Let's welcome Susan.
Thank you. Am I on? Are we? Yep, we're going. Good. Well, thanks very much. Matt was saying, oh, you know, what's she going to talk about? And it's hard to put my kind of head around the ways that teaching online has changed the way that I think about teaching in general. And so I tried to narrow it down into three neat and tidy phrases, three neat and tidy principles, but we'll see how that went. Some things that I learned, I had been teaching, obviously, face-to-face classes for quite a while, and then I got interested in thinking about teaching online and tried it a little bit. And then in true Bethel fashion, I tried it, and then I said, you know, I should really learn how to do this right. And so I took Matt's class last spring while I was on sabbatical that really systematically went through, here are some best practices in teaching online, and here are some things that you should do to be, you know, a good online teacher, and here are some things that the research shows. And as I was going through that experience, I discovered I was doing some things right, and I also discovered there were things that I really needed to work on. And so these principles came through loud and clear when I was thinking about my own teaching and thinking about teaching online. And one was this idea of tight boundaries, that when we ask students to do something, we need to put some boundaries around it that are clear to them, but those boundaries can't be too tight or it feels like busy work. So in creating the response activities and the assignments that I was asking students to do, I wanted to think of a way, you know, I thought of it kind of as a sandbox, that I have to put the frame around the sandbox and then fill it with sand and then let the students get in there and create something. And I'll talk more about kind of how I did that in my classes later on. But really thinking about the boundaries of the assignments. What was I going to teach? What did I want students to learn? What kinds of things show that learning or don't show that learning? And that was something I really wrestled with as I was learning to teach online. The second piece is more of a practical piece, but it also is extremely important in teaching online, is the idea of explicit instructions, being very, very clear about what to do. And in face-to-face, it's kind of a luxury that we can correct people mid-course, or students can raise their hands and say, what did I do here? I was confused. In online learning, I did find that the frustration level amps up in a hurry because people kind of feel like they're trying to do it, they don't have much time, and they're working with this machine that doesn't seem to be responding to them. And so I learned to be much better at giving good instructions, and I'll talk about that as well a little later. Probably the most revolutionary thing that happened was that I started to think about teaching in a new way, and one of those ways was that I started to see grading as actual teaching. And that was pretty interesting for me, especially being a writing teacher. You would think that I would have figured this out a long time ago. But I started to find in my online teaching that the times when I was interacting most richly with students was when I was giving them feedback on things. When I was giving them suggestions about their writing, when I was looking at drafts, those kinds of things. And all of a sudden, grading became not just, well, I taught this and now I've got this big pile of stuff I have to do to finish up, but I really want to get this over with so I can go back to my teaching. I started to see this pile of paperwork or digital paperwork as actual teaching. And when I was giving students feedback, that was something that I started to view as actual teaching, which was a completely different way of thinking about my job. The other principle is modularity a word? Okay, it is today. All right. So the other principle was this idea of modularity, that when you teach online, there are certain things that take a long time to put together. They're difficult, especially video pieces. You know, once you get them just right, you want to be able to use them again and again, which I resisted somewhat, right, Matt? Because I felt like, well, I don't want to kind of divorce my teaching from time and place, and I felt a little bit constrained by saying, well, this little video piece, so I could make another video that's just specific to this class, and then I could make a video about the topic. But that was something I wrestled with too, was trying not to make online teaching feel spaceless and timeless. And so that came back when I started thinking about face-to-face teaching as well. So with those 4 principles in mind, I want to show you a little bit about how this played out in my college writing class this fall. I, as I said, took the online learning course in the spring. I taught an online course in the summer, and then now I'm teaching college writing face-to-face this fall. And it's been fun to, you know, kind of play in my little laboratory that I call college writing this fall. My students are well aware I'm experimenting on them. So one of the questions that I've been exploring in college writing this fall is, what does it mean to learn? Okay, how do I know when my students are learning? If I tell them to do it, it's up to them to learn it. This kind of is where I might have started. That I told them to read the chapter. They are responsible to absorb the material in the chapter, to understand the material in the chapter. That's kind of their responsibility. I picked out the book and I assigned the chapter, and I maybe set up the chapter in class a little bit. Okay, well, that doesn't work very well online because I don't, see the students in the same way that I would in class. So in class, they'd come in, I'd say, did everybody read chapter 1? Mutter, mutter, mutter. Anyone have any questions? No questions. Great. You all learned chapter 1. Moving on. But obviously in an online setting, you can't do that. So there was this element of, if I don't see it, I don't know whether they've learned it. So before, students read the chapter, came to class ready to take an unannounced quiz at any moment, so they would, kind of be motivated to learn it. But I found that in my new kind of paradigm, that in college writing this year, I've really been sending them into the reading with a specific task that I want them to do with that reading. Okay? And so all of the chapters, I think the book that we're using has 12 chapters. I've got 12 little response activities and that are really focused on what I want them to get out of the chapter. So let me show you one. Okay, this is really hard to see, but I will point it out here. Okay, so there are 2 big concepts that are in this chapter. One is called nature deficit disorder. We're reading Richard Lou's Last Child in the Woods. This one's biophilia, okay? So I'm saying, what is nature deficit disorder like? Okay, and they have to list 4 illustrations from the reading with page numbers. Examples from current events that they have found that have to go with this concept. Okay, what is it not like? They need 4 illustrations from the reading with page numbers. And 2 examples from their own experience to make a definition of this concept. So what I'm telling my students is, these 2 concepts are really important in this chapter, and I want you to get these. But I also want you to think about how they play out in real life, in current events, and then they have to choose one other important concept from the chapter and do the same thing. So when they come to class, we can have a pretty rich discussion about this because I know that they know what the concept is. They've got some examples. They've played with this concept a little bit more. And so it then allows us to start our discussion not here, but it allows us to start our discussion here because we have this kind of platform to work from. They turn these in electronically on Moodle, and if I get a chance in an 8 o'clock class, I try to take a good look through them, and that also helps me kind of plan what's going to happen in the discussion. So this I can really see what they have learned or what they've maybe missed from the chapter. It's a way for me to see their learning versus kind of the generalized nodding that might happen on another day. Any comments or questions? These are small assignments. The math came out that they're worth 7 points apiece. I'm just looking, did they engage with the material? That's worth 3 points. Did they use examples? That's worth 2 points. Is it complete? Did it follow directions? 2 points. And my TA can grade a lot of these with that kind of easy scale. Yes?
Was there some structure on Moodle that allowed you to have places for them to actually fill in
What they
stuff in
did
boxes?
for this one is I just made this a Word document.
Okay.
They uploaded the document, filled it in, and turned it back as an assignment. I'm going to show you a couple of others that we've done with Google Docs where everyone's stuff has gone to the same document. Yeah, so I just ran this out of a Word document.
Okay.
Is there another way to do it? Anybody? Better way? Okay.
There is actually a way now you can, I don't want to take a
No, go ahead.
recommendation. In Moodle now, you can create, and this is new as of our last version, you can create an essay question in the quiz module and pre-populate the essay answer area. So if you wanted to put a table like this in the answer area for the question, you can have like a one question quiz that the students take if you wanted to use that format. And the students could simply go in and just fill this thing out. I actually think her way of doing it is more effective for what these students are doing, but that would be a way to pre-populate.
Thanks. All right, so, if I don't see it, I don't know if they've learned it. And I keep coming back to that as I'm planning. What can they show me? What can they do? My student teachers are getting really sick of me preaching to them about this. And, how do you know they learned it? How do you know? How do you know? Did you see anything? And so that's one of my really important principles that I've been discovering this year. Okay, this is a quote from Jay Rasmussen, who you just met, if you haven't already. The person who does the most work learns the most. This has been something else that I've been thinking a lot about. In online learning, it feels like there's a lot of work. There is a lot of work. It takes a long time to put together a whole course online. And I've tried to be careful about how much I pre-digest for students. So I think of, the birds that you hear about that will eat all of the food, and then when they get back to the nest, they regurgitate it and feed it to the babies. I don't really want to be that mama bird, right? I want them to do their own digesting. And so I've tried to strike a balance between giving students, again, good parameters, good boundaries, but not necessarily pre-digesting everything for them. So I want to set up a frame with which they can interact, and interact with the material and with each other. Okay, so here's an example of a way that, again, a college writing assignment changed in thinking about this idea of pre-digestion, if you will. Okay. Before, students read the chapter on several mechanical issues from our handbook. I would prepare a lecture with numerous examples. Students would practice on these artificial examples. Okay. Now, I kept thinking to myself, okay, it's taking me a couple hours to really put together a good PowerPoint with interesting examples, and I'm really working on this, and I've got pictures, and I've got all this great stuff, but at the same time, I'm doing a whole lot of work, and students really aren't doing that much. They are trying, you know, they aren't, I'm not asking very much of them other than to show up and try out some examples. So again, as a reading response, I thought, okay, how can I make them get more involved with this? All right, so now I'm going to need to go to our Google chart, which I hope will appear. There we go. Okay. That's not it. So what I did was I created it's true. Okay, there's Chrome, there's that. That's not easy. Let's see if it'll pull it this way. So I created a chart that had the mechanical issues. There were 5 different ones, like using passive voice and some various other kinds of. Let me show this to you. We'll go this way.
It's on your other tab, I think. If you go to the second tab up at the top.
No,
That's not it.
that's coming later. But thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I got it all fired up, I promise. Here we go. Okay, so I created a Google Doc that included different sections. So the first one you can see was on active and passive voice. And then I had students choose an original sentence from their draft. Then they had to improve it. So the plane was noisy with the sounds of children was the original sentence. Okay, then this student improved it by taking out was noisy and giving fussing, whining. Okay, they gave some action to it. And then she explained the changes that she made. So they had to choose 3 different sentences from their own work and enter it onto this chart that showed the different kinds of mechanical issues that were in the text. Then again, when we came to class, we had this nice launching pad for discussion. I could say, you know what, so-and-so has a great example of this. Look what she did here. Such and such, okay, I want to show, let's look at a before and after, and let's make sense of why the second one is better. And so we can give students then, they had to read the text, go into their own work, find examples, make revisions, and then explain those revisions to the class. A much richer way than me doing all the work. Okay? So I'm starting to think of assignments in that way as well. How can I get them in and have them apply material right away? How can I really be sure that students are not just reading it, not just learning the material, but that they're going into their own work and applying? Comments, questions? Okay, another idea that I had to play with a lot in thinking about online learning was what can only I do, especially in thinking about those giant open access courses where a teacher will have thousands of students. And so I started to think differently about my role as well. And the before was kind of, my role was mainly to organize and present information and to evaluate student work. So I was kind of there at the beginning, telling them what to do, what to read, and then I kind of exited the scene while they did whatever I asked them to do, and then I would come back at the end and say, how did you do? Did you do well? Did you not do well? What was good about it? What was bad about it? Okay, that tended to be my role. I'm now thinking of myself in a little different kind of role. My role is more of a coach, that I'm not just starting them out, letting them do their thing and coming back. I'm thinking about, okay, where they might need me the most now is in the middle. You know, they might really not need me as much on the information input side of the equation. There are lots of ways that information can be given to students, or that they can access information. And a computer can do that. An open access course even can do that, right? And we have now, you know, different programs and algorithms that can even evaluate essays. So both of these two things, if I depend on those two things as my role in my role as a teacher, I'm going to be obsolete pretty quick. But if I am in the middle here, where the learning is happening, and I'm coaching and I'm talking with students and I'm guiding them as the learning is taking place, that seems to be the place where I can be the most effective. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, how is that played out in college writing? Okay, at the beginning, I would give my students the rubric and show them a sample paper and say, okay, here's a paper, here's how I would score this paper, right? Input, evaluation. Here's how I'm going to score this paper, here's how it fits in the rubric or doesn't fit. And that works pretty well. The students had a pretty good model. They could see what I was going to look for, which is, of course, what they're most worried about, right? How will I be graded and when is it due? But I thought, again, are they really interacting with the material, and am I getting a chance to see them interacting with the material? And so what I've done with this one is, we did this just last week. I gave them this paper on Google Docs, which is called the research paper that really needs help. Okay? And we looked at the rubric and said, okay, here's what a good paper looks like. Here's a description of a good paper. And I told them, this is not a good paper. This is not a good paper at all. And we divided into some categories. And again, this is hard to read, I know, because it's in colors, but all the students had their laptops, so we were doing this all together. And I gave them each a category from the rubric, like use of sources, ideas and content, documentation. All of those were pieces of the rubric. And each group of 3 had to go into the paper, make changes in their color, and then they had to also make a list of the changes that they made. Now, it was a little messy to have 5 or 6 groups all in this document at once, but it also made it pretty interesting. Hey, wait, you changed our sentence. That's our sentence. Give that sentence back. And it gave me a chance to go in, you know, and sit in with the groups and see what questions they were running into. What were they wondering about? They got into documentation. Well, do you want MLA or APA? And then a couple of people knew MLA well and a couple of people knew APA well, so they had to talk about that. They had to make some choices about, well, the group that was working on organization had a little conflict with the group that was working on sentence fluency, because organization was saying, the first main point is, and off they would go, and sentence fluency was saying, oh, that's a terrible sentence, you've got to do better than that. And I was able then to be a part of all those conversations and to see how things worked, both visually, and so I could see kind of if a group was going in the right direction, and then I could get to them. Or we can talk about it right then on the spot. Okay, you see how that's different? How I'm kind of inserting myself into the middle of the project instead of at the beginning and the end. So I keep thinking of, keep trying to think of ways to do that more and to be present in the part of the class session when the learning is taking place. And it also means that I'm thinking about what happens in the class session differently. I know you've heard probably of the flipped classroom, right? But I'm starting to think about what's really the important The important role that I have, well, I really could, put the lecture online and have them show up for work time in class, and we've done that several times this fall. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 library days, which is by far the most library days that we've had, that I've ever had in college writing. Partly because for me to tell them in class, okay, here's how to use a database, and then send them off to use a database as homework, doesn't make as much sense as it does for them to maybe watch a little presentation on using a database before they come to class. Then when they get to class, I'm there, Will Keeler is my library representative. He and I, we're back in this area, everyone's on a computer, Will and I are there, sometimes my TA comes, and we're working individually with students, answering questions, figuring out some of the really fuzzy pieces of library research. I have a student who is doing her paper on the shift from an from a hunting and gathering society to an agricultural society, and how that has changed the way we view the environment. Okay. I have no idea what search terms you would use to get at that, but Will is really good at that. And so to be in that place with the students is a better use of my time, and is a better use of their time than for me to be presenting how to use a database in a way that they can get somewhere else. We've done the same with writing work times. I've done more individual conferences with students, so I've canceled class and they've had to watch a video online or do a piece of reading as a substitute for class on that day, and then my time is having the students come in with their drafts and we're taking a look at things. So it's helped me focus on the things that I'm most interested in, I think do the most good. But again, that principle of using technology to still help them stay in the flow of things and get the information that they need, it's been a really good combination. All right. One of the other tools that I've started to use much more as I'm thinking of myself as a teacher who gives feedback and giving feedback as part of my teaching process. How many people use Turnitin regularly? Okay, I'm going to give a little commercial, and I'm not the right person to do this because I'm just figuring this out. But this is when students turn in papers to Moodle. You can use this feature, which is called from turnitin.com, and many of you are probably used to the originality report that will tell you if they have plagiarized or where all of their, there's a part of their paper like this one, this little chunk right here came from this source right here, and you can see that, which is a great tool. But GradeMark is another piece that their paper comes up right here. You can see it. These are problems that my students often have, so I have made a little list of problems. So here, an apostrophe. Okay, I can say, okay, right here is the apostrophe issue, so I can go ahead and just drag that over into the paper. If I want to put a note on it, for example, like title punctuation, okay, I put this note on, underline or italicize journal title, put articles in quotes. Okay, I have written that 10,000 times in my life, right? I can just choose it from over here and send it over. I can also create my own comment, so I can just write my comment there, and I can attach it to a piece of the rubric. So, for example, if this has to do with organization, I attach it to organization, and then I have my rubric is over here as well. So if I click on, you can see source use 20 down here at the bottom, here's what a 20 is in source use. Paper consistently synthesizes information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So students can see, oh yeah, that's a 20. Now they have this rubric already. I've given it to them in paper, but this way they can take a look at what they got, what that was worth, and it will show as well, for example, here was my comment on organization. It will give them all the comments that I've tagged that have to do with organization, which is also nice for me on a longer paper, that I could say, okay, here are the different comments I made throughout the paper on organization, and I can look at all those as I'm using the rubric. Yes?
You created this on Turnitin, right?
Yes,
Not on Moodle.
correct. You have to put the rubric in on Turnitin. And just like Moodle, you can save them from year to year, or you can use, there are several, you can make your collection of them. It is a little bit fussy and time consuming to put it in to Turnitin. I do want to teach my TA to do that because it's a little fussy. But once it's in there, it's in there. And I teach the research paper every year, and I use the same rubric generally every year. So that's a good fit for a major assignment. Again, this allows me to give better feedback. I get done faster. And then when you click this rubric percentage, it sends it right to the Moodle gradebook. So I'm feeling better about my stack of papers to grade by using this because I feel like it's a better use of my time. It gives it more specific feedback, and it also, again, thinking about it as this is my job, this is important, that I am giving this kind of feedback, this kind of coaching, if you will. I'm trying to think of it as coaching. That will help them then move forward as writers. That was a really cursory look at Turnitin. But it gives you an idea of what's possible, and a lot of people don't know that. Yeah.
Do you use Turnitin for drafts as well, and then can you compare preliminary drafts with final drafts? You could make changes.
You sure could. I'm going to be real honest that I have a very firm policy that I never collect drafts. I always make the students physically bring the draft in and we sit down and look at it together because I can't keep up otherwise. So you definitely could do that. You could do a draft one.
I'm wondering if it makes for easy comparison between.
Not really.
Okay.
Not that I know of. Any techies know that? No, I don't think it only keeps one assignment, I think, per.
You can set it up to save more than one draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have two parts, so you can have parts, that's what Turnitin does.
Okay.
One could be draft one, the other could be draft two.
You could have them open on two different screens and compare them, but it doesn't do any sort of
Analysis.
automatic comparison for you. Okay.
Good question. Any other questions? Yes.
Susan, just one comment
Yeah.
here. The other piece is we now, as of yesterday, have made this easier for everyone because Turnitin is directly integrated into both the Moodle assignment and Moodle forums.
Okay.
So you can actually use this tool and either use the Moodle grading or the Turnitin grading
Right.
directly from within the assignment.
So now the two of them are integrated directly within.
That's
the
correct.
assignment. Is that going to make it easier for me to make my rubrics too?
No.
Oh.
In fact, it makes it more complicated because you have to choose to use the Moodle rubrics or the Turnitin rubrics.
Well, maybe maybe Moodle 3.5 will have that.
But you don't have to create a separate kind of assignment in Moodle
Right.
if you want to do originality checking or use Turnitin.
Okay.
So you can simply just decide on this assignment I don't want to use it, or on this assignment I do, and all of those stats and everything will show up right in the normal assignment grading area. That you
Okay,
can
so
see.
you don't have to designate ahead of time necessarily, oh, I want this to be a Turnitin assignment.
Right.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So here's what I would like to leave you with today. As you are thinking about your courses and thinking about your role as the teacher, think about what you might be doing already in your face-to-face courses that could be done online, that the computer could help you with, to free you up for the things that are really important. Why is it important for my students and me to be in the same room? If you think about those rich times when you are in the same room with your students and there's all this stuff happening, what can you kind of send to help technology take away so you can have more of those rich times with your students? Why is it important that the students are in the same room as each other, which we didn't talk about much, but again, that same idea. How can you, again, you present a bunch of material in class, then you send students off to do group work. Would it make more sense for them to have that material presented to them, and then as they're doing their group work, you are present with them, working through some of those things? So it's a way of thinking a little bit more about your priorities as a teacher, how to use your expertise in the best way possible, and also then how students can benefit the most from being here, being in this place and in this time with you, and maximize the things that they're learning. So, thank you.